Welcome to this explainer, the Irish illusion or economic miracle. Today, we're going to dive straight into one of the most fascinating economic puzzles out there right now. We're looking at exactly how a relatively small island nation completely transformed itself into one of the most profitable, bustling hubs on Earth for absolute titans of industry. I'm talking about companies like Apple, Google, and Meta. It's a massive story of strategy, vast wealth, and, well, some pretty significant trade-offs.
Is Ireland winning the deal or just facilitating it? As we unpack all of this, we're actually going to frame the facts as a bit of a structured debate. We really want to answer that core question. Is Ireland truly winning this economic deal, or are they literally just facilitating it for others? So to get a solid grip on the mechanics at play here, we'll look at it first from the perspective of an enthusiastic corporate advocate, and then we'll flip it and view it from the perspective of a cautious systemic critic.
5 million. Now, to grasp the sheer, almost unbelievable scale of this whole phenomenon, just consider that number for a second. 5 million. That's roughly the entire population of Ireland. Now consider that truly eye-watering amounts of global corporate profits are routed through this nation every single year. You literally have some of the biggest companies in the world shifting billions through an economy built for a population smaller than New York City. It's just a stunning contrast, right?
Late 20th century, high unemployment and immigration. 1990s, pivot to attract foreign direct investment. 2000s, rise of the 12.5% corporate tax rate. Today, global headquarters for multinational corporations. And let's be totally clear here, this wasn't just some happy accident. Facing severe unemployment and mass emigration back in the late 20th century, policymakers realized they needed a radical pivot. So they executed a highly deliberate strategy to attract foreign direct investment at almost any cost. This eventually evolved into their famous 12.5% corporate tax rate in the 2000s, which brings us directly to today, where the skyline is just dotted with the global headquarters of these multinational megacorporations.
Section 1. The Advocate's Case, the Economic Boom.
U.S. federal corporate tax at 21% versus Ireland's corporate tax at 12.5%. The corporate advocate points first and foremost to this undeniable financial math. You have the U.S. federal corporate tax sitting at 21%, right? Against that, Ireland has historically offered a rock-solid 12.5% rate. For a massive company generating tens of billions in profit, well, that percentage point difference translates into astronomical savings. It is absolutely the ultimate global headline for attracting big business. Profit structuring. These are historical strategies like the double Irish or intellectual property shifting used to record globally generated profits in low-tax jurisdictions. Because you see, it wasn't just about that baseline tax rate. It was really about how those profits were structured. Ireland's environment historically allowed for loopholes that essentially let companies funnel untaxed global profits through Irish subsidiaries. We're talking about tax dollars that otherwise might have funded local schools or roads, perfectly legally rerouted. This exact legal framework actually famously led to a European Commission investigation into Apple's incredibly low effective tax rates. The whole system was just meticulously designed to optimize corporate wealth.
A gateway to over 450 million U consumers, a steady pipeline of tech and finance talent, an English-speaking workforce, and a strong IP protection and legal system. The Advocate is always quick to remind us that Ireland isn't just a tax haven. It's a highly functional strategic toolkit. Beyond those tax advantages, companies secure completely frictionless access to the massive EU market. Plus, they tap into a deep pipeline of English-speaking talent and operate within a highly stable legal environment. For a U.S. company, setting up shop over there feels culturally familiar, but strategically, it's unmatched.
Hundreds of thousands of direct and indirect jobs created in tech and pharma. So what does Ireland actually get out of this side of the bargain? Well, the undeniable result has been a massive influx of really high-paying jobs. Entire thriving ecosystems have sprung up across the tech and pharmaceutical sectors. Local university graduates are feeding directly into firms like Microsoft and Pfizer, which drives up wages and modernizes infrastructure. To the corporate advocate, this right here is a clear-cut economic miracle.
Section 2. The critic's rebuttal. Systemic risks.
Housing pressure. High-paying multinational jobs drive up rents, house prices, and strain infrastructure, especially in Dublin. But wait, here is where the critic steps in, immediately pointing to the most visible, painful downside for the average citizen. When you suddenly drop thousands of extremely well-paid tech and pharma jobs into a concentrated area, demand absolutely skyrockets. This has caused intense strain, severely driving up rents and house prices, especially in Dublin. The local infrastructure is really struggling to keep pace, creating this harsh divide between folks inside that multinational bubble and those outside of it.
Corporate tax intake. A handful of top multinationals versus all other companies. This brings us to what might be the critic's most terrifying argument: economic dependence. Just think about this breakdown. A staggering portion of the entire nation's corporate tax revenue relies on just a tiny handful of colossal firms. The state is essentially being bankrolled by a few giant players.
Concentration risk means one global downturn, policy change, or restructuring decision could cause revenue to drop sharply. The absolutely crucial point here is that this immense concentration creates perilous volatility. The critic argues that one single global downturn, one international policy shift, or even just a random border and restructuring decision over in Silicon Valley could drastically slash Ireland's public revenues literally overnight. When your economy is this dependent on a few foreign entities, well, you simply aren't fully in control of your own financial destiny.
Modified GNI, an alternative economic metric developed by the Central Statistics Office because multinational activity so heavily inflates standard GDP figures. Furthermore, the critic notes that this multinational activity distorts the economy so wildly that standard measurements literally stopped working. Back in 2015, Ireland's standard GDP artificially jumped by 26% overnight. It was a glitch famously dubbed leprechaun economics. It got so extreme the statisticians had to invent a brand new metric, this modified GNI, just to strip out the corporate illusions and measure actual domestic growth. When you have to invent new math just to understand your own economy, yeah, the critic argues you have a massive systemic distortion.
Section 3. The verdict. A sustainable future? Looking at the positives versus the negatives. High employment and wages, massive tax revenues, and global economic relevance on one side. Housing crisis pressure, over-reliance on multinationals, and exposure to global tax changes on the other. So, acting as an impartial referee here between the advocate's economic boom and the critic's systemic vulnerabilities, what is the final balance sheet? The trade-offs are incredibly clear. Ireland traded low taxes for tremendous growth and global relevance, but they accepted intense housing pressure and a really risky over-reliance on a few tech giants as the heavy cost of doing business. It's essentially a high-wire act of economic policy.
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has pushed for a global minimum corporate tax of 15%. And you know what? That high-wire act is getting a lot bumpier right now because the global rules are shifting as we speak. Ireland recently had to agree to this OECD-driven 15% minimum corporate tax rate. Now, while that is still highly competitive globally, it definitely signifies that the era of the untouchable 12.5% rate, which was Ireland's primary competitive edge, is slowly beginning to erode. The loopholes are closing up.
Can Ireland keep them without depending on them? Which leaves us with one final, absolutely vital question as this explainer wraps up. As the global landscape changes and tax rates start to equalize, can Ireland retain these powerhouse economy-driving companies without remaining so dangerously dependent on them? It's really the ultimate test of a modern economic miracle. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Take a moment to think about how these invisible corporate structures shape the very cities we live in, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.